The Dyatlov Pass incident. The expedition begins. In the winter of 1959, 9 young, experienced hikers embarked on a journey that would become one of Russia's most enduring and haunting mysteries. The leader, Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute, had planned a challenging trek into the Ural Mountains. His goal, to cross the pass later named after him, a route rarely traveled due to its harsh conditions. The 9 were, Igor Dyatlov, the leader, skilled and respected. Yuri Doroshenko, experienced and strong. Lyudmila Dubinina, the only woman on the trip, resilient and tough. Alexander Kolovatov, reliable and steadfast. Zinada Kalmagarova, a close friend to Lyudmila. Rustem Slobodin, known for his humor. Nikolai Tchibozbrignal, an accomplished skier. Semyon Zolotaryov, quiet and observant. Yuri Krivonischenko, calm and dependable. The team was well prepared with supplies, warm clothes, and all the gear needed to brave the harsh Siberian winter. In January, they set out, eager and confident, into the wilderness. The Ural Mountains were a vast, frozen expanse of silence and snow, sharp winds cutting across jagged peaks. As the days passed, the hikers left a trail through the forest and mountains. They shared laughter, songs, and campfires in the evenings. The harsh cold was a constant companion, but the group was prepared. Their journey was to last several weeks, covering over 300 kilometers of rugged terrain. They kept journals and notes, excited about the adventure. But the weather grew unpredictable, snowstorms frequent and fierce. The last camp on the night of February 1st, the group pitched their tent on the slopes of Kalatsyakl, a mountain whose name chillingly translates to Dead Mountain in the local Mansi language. For reasons unknown, the hikers cut open their tent from the inside and fled into the frozen wilderness wearing only their underwear and light clothing. Search parties found the campsite abandoned, the tent slashed open. Footprints led away from the camp into the woods. The bodies were discovered in stages over the following weeks, scattered across the snow. The strange funding. Some of the hikers died of hypothermia, but others bore horrifying injuries, crushed ribs, fractured skulls, internal trauma, and some were missing eyes and tongues. There were no signs of a struggle or animal attack. Clothing showed elevated levels of radiation. What could have caused such strange and brutal deaths? Was it an avalanche? A secret military test? Or something beyond explanation? Great. Here's the next 3,000 words continuing the story of the Dyatlov Pass incident, diving deeper into the search, the discoveries, and the eerie details that baffled investigators and the world. The search begins. When the hikers failed to return on schedule, concern quickly mounted. Their families and friends urged authorities to organize a search party. The vast, snow-covered wilderness posed a daunting challenge, but several teams of rescuers set out in early February, trudging through knee-deep snow and battling freezing winds. Days passed with little sign of the group. Then, on February 26th, the rescuers stumbled upon a disturbing sight. The tent. The hiker's tent lay half buried in snow, oddly positioned on the slope of Kalatsyakl. Its nylon fabric was slashed open from the inside, as if the occupants had desperately tried to escape. Inside, investigators found footprints in the snow leading away from the camp barefoot or wearing only socks, and heading toward the forest some 1.5 kilometers away. Nearby, searchers found the first 2 bodies, those of Yuri Doroshenko and Igor Dyatlov. They lay near a small cedar tree, stripped of most clothing, eyes wide open in the frozen silence. Their death seemed to be caused by hypothermia. A gruesome discovery. Over the following days, the rest of the bodies were found, scattered around the forest. The sequence of discovery shocked the searchers and investigators alike. The next 3 bodies were found between the cedar tree and the tent. They, too, were underdressed and showed signs of hypothermia. Months later, when the snow began to melt, rescuers uncovered the last 4 bodies buried in a ravine, some 75 meters from the cedar tree. What made this case horrifying was not just the deaths but the bizarre and brutal nature of some injuries. The injuries: the final 4 victims bore injuries far beyond what could be explained by hypothermia or an avalanche. Semyon Zolotaryov's skull was fractured. Ludmila Dubinina had severe chest trauma, her ribs were broken and she suffered damage to her internal organs. 1 victim was missing her tongue. 2 were missing eyes. Despite these grave injuries, the skin on the bodies was mostly intact, and there were no external wounds that could explain such trauma. It was as if some immense force had crushed them from within. The unexplained evidence. Investigators found strange anomalies at the campsite and on the bodies. High levels of radiation were detected on some of the victims' clothing. The tent was cut from the inside, a sign of urgent flight, but no signs of avalanche debris or struggle. Their shoes and belongings were left behind, indicating extreme panic. Some clothing contained strange orange patches, later linked to radioactive material. Theories emerge. As news of the incident spread, a storm of speculation erupted. Many theories were proposed. Avalanche. The hikers fled their tent to escape an avalanche. But the slope's incline was too gentle to trigger one, and no evidence of avalanche debris was found. Katabatic wind. Sudden, powerful winds could have driven the hikers into panic, forcing them to leave the tent. Military involvement. Some suspected secret Soviet military tests, possibly involving parachute mines or weapons tests. Infrasound. Some scientists theorized that specific wind patterns cause terrifying low-frequency sounds, inducing panic and irrational behavior. Yeti or unknown creature. Local legends told of mysterious creatures in the mountains, and some believed the hikers fled a predator. The investigation's limits. Soviet authorities conducted an investigation but faced political pressure and lack of transparency. The official cause of death was a compelling natural force, a vague phrase that only deepened the mystery. The case files remained sealed for decades, and many details only emerged through declassified documents and independent research. The legacy. The Dyatlov Pass incident became a cultural enigma, inspiring books, documentaries, movies, and endless debates. For years, families of the victims sought answers that remained frustratingly out of reach. The mountain itself retained its sinister reputation, a place where the silence seemed to whisper untold horrors. Here's the final part of the story, wrapping up the Dyatlov Pass incident with recent investigations, theories, and its haunting legacy. New investigations. Decades after the tragedy, curiosity and advances in forensic science sparked renewed interest. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation, focusing on more mundane explanations like avalanche and snow slab collapses. Experts examined the terrain and weather conditions with modern technology, concluding that a small avalanche or snow slab could have caused the hikers to flee their tent in panic. The lack of typical avalanche debris was explained by the type of snow involved and the slope's peculiar shape. This new explanation, while grounded in science, failed to satisfy many who pointed to the more baffling injuries and strange evidence. The radiation mystery. Radiation on the victims' clothing remains unexplained. Some speculate the hikers accidentally crossed paths with secret Soviet nuclear tests or were exposed to radioactive minerals native to the region. No conclusive evidence ties the radiation directly to their deaths, but it deepens the aura of danger surrounding the incident. Psychological theories. Other researchers focus on psychological factors, suggesting that the hikers experienced paradoxical undressing, a phenomenon where hypothermia victims feel intense heat and remove clothing, which fits with some found in only underwear. Others propose that infrasound from wind blowing over the mountain's ridges induced irrational terror, leading the group to flee en masse in confusion and fear. The human story. Behind the mystery lies a profoundly human tragedy: 9 vibrant young lives cut short in the wilderness. Letters and photographs recovered from the group reveal their hopes, dreams, and bonds. They were students, friends, explorers eager to test their limits. Their courage and camaraderie stand in stark contrast to the brutal and inexplicable end they met. A haunting legacy. Today, Dyatlov Pass is a somber pilgrimage site for hikers, investigators, and curious travelers. The mountains hold their secrets tight, and the silence remains as chilling as ever. Memorials honor the victims, but the questions endure: what truly happened on that cold night in February 1959? Was it nature's cruelty, human error, or something beyond understanding? The mystery lives on. The Dyatlov Pass incident endures as a chilling reminder of the wilderness's unforgiving nature and the limits of human knowledge. As new generations revisit the story, piecing together fragments of truth, the mountain watches silently, keeping its sure. Here's the start of story number 2, the Hinterkaifeck murders, 1922, a real and chilling case from Germany's past. I'll begin with about 3,000 words covering the background, the family, the eerie events before the murders, and the initial discovery. The Hinterkaifeck murders. A quiet farmstead. Nestled in the Bavarian countryside of Germany, the Hinterkaifeck farm was a modest homestead surrounded by dense forests and rolling fields. The small wooden house, with its thatched roof and sturdy beams, was home to the Gruber family: Andreas and Kazilia, an elderly couple, their widowed daughter Victoria Gabriel, and her 2 young children, Kazilia and Joseph. Life on the farm was simple and hard-working, but the Grubers were well known and respected by neighbors in the nearby village. They lived a quiet existence, largely self-sufficient and somewhat isolated. Strange noises. In the weeks leading up to the murders in March 1922, neighbors and villagers began to report odd occurrences around the farm. Footsteps were heard in the attic at night, despite the fact that no one was supposed to be living there. Strange noises echoed through the house, doors creaked open on their own, and farm animals seemed agitated. The family mentioned that they had noticed signs that someone was on the property, like footprints in the snow leading to and from the house, but nothing was stolen. Victoria reportedly told neighbors she felt watched and uneasy. The night of horror. On a cold March night, everything changed. No one knows exactly what transpired inside the farm that evening, but by the following morning, the Gruber family and their 2 visitors, a family friend and a maid, had all been brutally murdered. They were bludgeoned to death with a mattock, a heavy farming tool, left at the scene. The bodies were discovered in the house, some in the barn, and the killer had stayed on the farm for days after the murders, feeding animals and using food supplies. The discovery, the grisly scene, was uncovered when neighbors became concerned after no one had been seen leaving or entering the farm for days. Authorities arrived to find the house in eerie silence, the occupants dead, and the farm eerily undisturbed otherwise. Investigators were baffled by the fact that the killer was still on the premises for days, a haunting presence invisible to the outside world. Investigation and theories. Despite extensive investigations, the murders at Hinterkaifeck remain unsolved. Many suspects were questioned: neighbors, relatives, and even Victoria's husband, who had recently disappeared, but no conclusive evidence was ever found. The case became a legend, whispered about for decades, a haunting reminder of violence lurking beneath the surface of rural life. Here's the next part of the Hinterkaifeck murders story, continuing with the investigation, the suspects, and the chilling aftermath. The Hinterkaifeck murders. The investigation deepens. As news of the murders spread, police descended on Hinterkaifeck. The rural isolation of the farm meant the killer had ample time to act without fear of interruption. Yet, despite the seemingly clear evidence, the murder weapon, footprints, and the presence of an unknown intruder, the case grew colder by the day. Detectives meticulously combed through the property, interviewing neighbors who reported strange sightings, shadowy figures lurking near the farm, unusual sounds at night, and in some accounts, even the scent of smoke when no fire was burning. A web of suspects. the investigation quickly became tangled with suspicion. Among the most talked about suspects were Lorenz Schlittenbauer, Victoria's neighbor, who reportedly disliked the Grubers. Joseph Gabriel, Victoria's missing husband, who vanished mysteriously months before the murders. A drifter spotted in the area around the time of the killings. Even members of the Gruber family themselves, due to potential inheritance disputes. Despite the intense scrutiny, no one was ever charged, and the trail eventually ran cold. The haunting presence. What made the Hinterkaifeck murders uniquely terrifying was the belief that the killer stayed after the crime. The family's maid had reportedly heard footsteps in the attic and voices after the murders. A neighbor even claimed to have seen lights in the house days after everyone was dead. This eerie detail has made Hinterkaifeck a symbol of unsolved terror, as if the farm was haunted not just by spirits, but by the lingering presence of evil. The legacy of fear. Over time, the Hinterkaifeck murders seeped into local folklore. The farm became a place of fear and fascination, abandoned and left to rot. New owners who attempted to live there reported strange noises and unsettling feelings, eventually abandoning the property. The murders have inspired books, documentaries, and true crime discussions worldwide, standing as one of Germany's most baffling cold cases. The mystery lives on. Despite new forensic technologies and renewed interest, the murders remain unsolved. Some modern investigations have revisited evidence, but definitive answers remain elusive. The question still haunts the minds of many: who was the person that entered the farm that night, killed the family, and then stayed on the property, unseen but ever present? Here's the final part of the Hinterkaifeck murders story, wrapping up with some of the most compelling theories, modern investigations, and the lasting impact of this chilling case. Modern theories and cold case investigations. In recent decades, the Hinterkaifeck murders have been revisited by true crime enthusiasts, historians, and forensic experts. Advances in forensic science raised hopes that new evidence could solve the decades-old mystery, but much of the original crime scene was disturbed or lost over time. Some of the most compelling theories include the husband's revenge. Joseph Gabriel, Victoria's missing husband, who disappeared months before the murders, might have returned in a fit of rage or jealousy. The neighbor's feud. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, who was rumored to have ongoing disputes with the Grubers over land and family issues. A random drifter or psychopath. Some believe an unknown, violent stranger happened upon the farm and murdered the occupants, then lingered in the hope of escaping detection. Psychological and social impacts. The brutality and mystery of the Hinterkaifeck murders shook the rural community and cast a long shadow over Bavarian history. The terror inspired fear of isolation and the unknown, especially in tight-knit farming communities. Folklore about the farm grew. Stories of ghost sightings and restless spirits permeated local culture. For the descendants of the Grubers, the murders remain a painful legacy. Hinterkaifeck in popular culture. Over the decades, the Hinterkaifeck murders inspired numerous books, films, and podcasts, each attempting to uncover or dramatize the events. Writers have explored everything from true crime exposés to supernatural interpretations, feeding the public's fascination with this dark and perplexing case. The farm today. The original Hinterkaifeck farm no longer exists. The site is marked by memorials, and visitors come to pay respects or feel the eerie atmosphere. Despite attempts to explain the murders, the farm's secrets seem locked away, as impenetrable as the dense Bavarian forest that surrounds the land. A mystery that endures. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of the most chilling and baffling crimes in modern history. The unanswered questions, the footsteps in the attic, the killer who stayed after the crime, the brutal slaughter continue to fascinate and disturb. As time moves on, the story of Hinterkaifeck serves as a grim reminder of human darkness lurking. The silent twins born together, bound forever. June and Jennifer Gibbons were born on April 11, 1963, in Barbados and moved with their family to the United Kingdom shortly after. The Gibbons family settled in Haverfordwest, Wales, a place where the twins would spend most of their lives, growing further and further away from the world around them. From the moment they could speak, June and Jennifer were different. As toddlers, they developed their own private language, a sped-up version of English only they could understand. To outsiders, it sounded like a bizarre, whispered code. As they grew, they became increasingly inseparable, and disturbingly silent. The wall of silence. At school, teachers quickly noticed the twins' odd behavior. They never spoke to classmates or teachers, only whispering to each other in their strange, secret tongue. Even in front of their parents, the girls remained nearly mute. They moved in unison, mirrored each other's gestures, and often seemed to exist in their own reality, a world that was equal parts comforting and unnerving. Psychologists were baffled. Attempts at therapy failed. The twins resisted every effort to pull them into the outside world. They were sometimes separated to try to force independence, but this only led to physical and emotional shutdowns, as though part of them died when they were apart. The inner world. Unable to connect with the world around them, June and Jennifer turned inward into a world of fiction and imagination. They began writing elaborate stories, often filled with violence, lust, and power struggles. Their writing revealed obsessions with dominance, especially themes of one twin controlling or killing the other. They filled journals with these disturbing narratives, detailing dark characters and twisted relationships. In private, they often fought bitterly. Their diaries revealed seething jealousy, hatred, and confusion about their dependence on one another. Jennifer once wrote, "We have become fatal enemies in each other's eyes. We feel the irritating deadly rays come out of our bodies, stinging each other's skin. A turn toward destruction." As teenagers, the twins' behavior escalated. They began committing crimes together: petty theft, arson, vandalism. One night, they set fire to a building at a local technical college, nearly killing someone. They were caught and eventually sentenced to Broadmoor Hospital, one of the UK's most notorious high-security psychiatric institutions, usually reserved for the criminally insane. The public was outraged. How could two teenage girls, silent and unassuming, end up in such a place? But inside Broadmoor, the darkness only grew. Life inside Broadmoor. Broadmoor was a grim, sterile fortress, its concrete walls and barred windows suffocating. For June and Jennifer, it became a psychological prison. They continued to isolate themselves, refusing to speak to staff or other patients. They communicated only with each other in their strange language, fueling their shared madness. In their journals, the twins wrote of possession, hatred, and death. They began to believe that for one of them to truly live, the other had to die. Jennifer wrote, "One of us is going to die. We have decided." The death pact. By the early 1990s, after nearly a decade in Broadmoor, their story began to attract media attention. A journalist, Marjorie Wallace, took interest and interviewed the twins over many months. She grew close to them, especially June, and began to uncover the full extent of their disturbing bond. June often spoke only with Wallace about how she feared Jennifer. Jennifer, in turn, would often hint at suicide, death, and sacrifice. Eventually, in 1993, authorities approved the twins' transfer to a lower security facility, a sign of progress. They were 29 years old. But just before the move, Jennifer told Wallace, "I'm going to die. We've decided." June and Jennifer Gibbo, continuing the disturbing and deeply psychological tale. This section explores the shocking death of one twin, the mystery surrounding it, and what followed for the surviving sister. The journey to freedom. It was March 1993. June and Jennifer Gibbons, after nearly 12 years locked inside Broadmoor Hospital, were finally being transferred to a more humane, open facility called Caswell Clinic in Bridgend, Wales. They had shown enough progress, at least in behavior, if not in speech, for doctors to approve their move. Journalist Marjorie Wallace accompanied them as they rode in a secure van, excited, nervous, and perhaps relieved. But Jennifer was quiet. Too quiet. She leaned her head against June's shoulder and whispered that she was tired. Very tired. She said again, calmly, "This is the end. I'm going to die. A death without explanation." Hours after arriving at the new clinic, Jennifer suddenly collapsed. Her pulse was faint, her breathing shallow. Doctors rushed to save her, but she was pronounced dead later that day. The cause, acute myocarditis, inflammation of the heart. There was no previous history of heart problems. No drugs, no poisons, no signs of trauma. No explanation. Just death. June was left alone for the first time in her life. Free at last. What followed stunned everyone. June, the same woman who had barely spoken a word to anyone outside her twin, suddenly began to speak. Not just brief words, but full sentences, flowing freely. She looked people in the eye. She was calm, clear, and for the first time, present. She mourned Jennifer, of course. She cried and kept a photograph of her sister nearby. But it was as if some weight had been lifted. To Marjorie Wallace, June said something chilling. "I'm free. At last. Jennifer gave up her life for me." Wallace was speechless. Had the twins made a pact? Had Jennifer willingly died to let June live? A pact in the shadows. In the months and years that followed, June revealed more. In private, she spoke of an unspoken, psychic agreement the twins had made while in Broadmoor. They believed one of them had to die or else both would remain trapped, silent, and condemned forever. Jennifer had agreed it would be her. She slowed her breathing. She simply let go. Though no doctor could confirm this, the timing, the inexplicable cause of death, and June's immediate behavioral transformation shocked those who had studied them. The one left behind. June remained in care for several more years, eventually moving into community housing. She now lives a quiet life in West Wales. She no longer writes fiction or diaries. She no longer speaks her secret language. The part of her that was bound to Jennifer, that strange psychic tether, died that day in 1993. But the question remains. Did Jennifer die of a medical condition? Or did she truly choose death, theories and legacy? Psychiatrists, psychologists, and writers have struggled to explain the silent twins. Their case defies normal diagnosis. Selective mutism, possibly. Folie à deux, shared psychosis? Likely. Twin telepathy, maybe. A paranormal bond, some say yes. Their writings, now archived, show two brilliant, twisted minds caught in an endless loop of mutual obsession, hatred, and dependence. Their story has been adapted into documentaries, plays, and books, most famously The Silent Twins by Marjorie Wallace. In 2022, a feature film was released, capturing the eerie and tragic nature of their lives. Silence that echoes. Jennifer is buried in a quiet cemetery in Wales. Her tombstone bears a short poem written by June. "We once were two/we two made one. We no more two/through life be one. Rest in peace." Some stories haunt not because of ghosts, but because of the unexplained, the human mystery, the kind where silence itself becomes. The Villisca axe murders a quiet town. The town of Villisca, Iowa in 1912 was a peaceful, small farming community. Neighbors knew one another by name, church bells rang on Sunday, and children played in open fields while their parents tended to their homes and crops. It was the kind of town where doors remained unlocked and strangers were noticed quickly. Nothing truly bad ever happened in Villisca until the morning of June 10, 1912. That day, the town awoke to a nightmare from which it would never fully recover. The Moore family. Josiah Joe Moore was a respected businessman and devoted family man. He lived in a modest white two-story home with his wife Sarah and their 4 children. Asterisk Herman, 11. Asterisk Catherine, 10. Asterisk Boyd, 7, asterisk Paul, 5. On the night of June 9, 1912, the Moore family attended a Children's Day service at their local Presbyterian church. Joining them were 2 neighbor girls Ina, 8, and Lena Stillinger, 12, who had been invited by Catherine for a sleepover. After a joyful evening, they returned to the Moore home just after 9:30 p.m. By morning, all 8 were dead. A house of silence. At around 8 a.m. on June 10, Mary Peckham, the Moores' elderly neighbor, noticed something odd. The house was unusually still. The Moores were early risers, and by now, chores should have been underway. The curtains were drawn tightly odd for a bright summer morning. Mary knocked. No answer. She called Joe's brother, Ross Moore, who arrived with a spare key. What he found inside was the stuff of true horror, the bloody discovery. Ross entered the front parlor. The house was deathly quiet. The shades were drawn in every room, all the mirrors covered in cloth. Climbing the stairs, Ross found Joe and Sarah Moore in bed, bludgeoned to death. Joe's face was unrecognizable. Beside him, Sarah lay in a pool of blood, her skull crushed. As he moved through the house, the grisly scene repeated, the 4 more children slaughtered in their beds. In the guest room on the first floor, the Stillinger sisters were found. Lena, unlike the others, showed signs of having awakened, her body twisted, a defensive wound on her arm. Her nightgown was pushed up. It suggested something even darker may have happened. The murder weapon, a bloodied axe, was found in the guest room. It belonged to Joe Moore. The crime scene oddities. The Villisca police were overwhelmed. This was a small town force unprepared for such brutality. The state of the crime scene revealed chilling details. Asterisk every mirror in the house had been covered with cloth. Asterisk all the bodies had been covered with sheets or clothing after death. Asterisk a plate of uneaten food and a basin of bloody water were left behind as if the killer washed up and tried to eat. Asterisk a kerosene lamp was placed at the foot of each bed, dimmed. Asterisk a slab of bacon was found on the floor next to the axe. Strangest of all, the killer had stayed inside the house, likely for hours after the murders, calm, calculated, and completely undetected. The town in panic. Word spread fast. Within hours, the Moore house was swarmed with townsfolk and curious onlookers. Dozens trampled through the scene, contaminating evidence. Some even touched the bodies before police intervened. The town spiraled into paranoia. People locked their doors. Fathers kept watch at night. Children refused to sleep alone. Villisca was no longer safe. Evil had entered its heart and no one knew who, or why. The investigation begins. Authorities interviewed anyone with a connection to the Moores. Theories bloomed like weeds. Suspects included asterisk a jealous business rival of Joe Moore, asterisk a local man with a known temper and obsession with Sarah, asterisk Reverend George Kelly, a traveling preacher with mental instability and disturbing interests, asterisk a possible serial killer, based on similar axe murders in neighboring towns. But there was no clear motive. No fingerprints. No one seen entering or leaving. Just a house filled with the dead and a silence that screamed. Absolutely. Here's part 2 of the Villisca axe murders, a deep dive into the suspects, the most disturbing possibilities, and the cases. Reverend George Kelly. If one suspect captured the imagination of investigators and the public alike, it was Reverend George Kelly. He was no ordinary preacher. Kelly was a traveling minister from England, small in stature, with a twitchy demeanor and a troubled mind. He arrived in Villisca on June 8, the day before the murders, to attend the same Children's Day service as the Moore family. During his stay, he exhibited bizarre behavior, watching the children too closely, asking inappropriate questions, and later leaving town early the morning after the murders. But what really drew attention was what came after. A confession, and a retraction. A few weeks after the murders, Kelly began sending strange letters to police and investigators. His writings were erratic, obsessive, and filled with religious overtones. Eventually, he confessed to the murders in excruciating detail. He claimed he'd been compelled by visions and a shadowy figure who commanded him to kill. But as soon as he was arrested and put in a cell, he recanted. He said the confession had been forced and that he was mentally unstable. His defense pointed to his history of psychosis and prior institutionalization. Despite the confession, the evidence against him was circumstantial. He went to trial twice. The first ended in a hung jury. The second, an acquittal. George Kelly walked free, and the case grew colder still. Other suspects. The case file swelled with names, over a dozen viable suspects, each one stranger than the last. Frank Jones, the rival. A prominent Villisca businessman and state senator. He had once employed Joe Moore, but they parted on bad terms. Rumors swirled that Moore had been involved with Jones's daughter-in-law, giving Jones both motive and influence to cover up a murder. But Jones had an airtight alibi, and powerful friends. William Mansfield, the Axeman. A suspected serial killer believed to be responsible for other axe murders in Illinois and Kansas, all eerily similar. Asterisk victims bludgeoned in their sleep. Asterisk mirrors covered. Asterisk lamps dimmed. Asterisk axes left behind. But Mansfield, too, was never charged. His alibi held, and witnesses wavered. The pattern of death. In the years before and after Villisca, other families were murdered in identical fashion. Small towns, entire households, all dead in their beds, killed with the blunt side of an axe. Always at night. Always no forced entry. Always silent. Could it have been the same man? The idea of a roaming, uncatchable serial killer terrified the public. Newspapers called him the man from the train. He would come in darkness, kill with precision, and vanish into the night. Historian Bill James later linked dozens of unsolved axe murders across the country to a single unidentified killer, one who may have struck in Villisca before disappearing forever. A house that wouldn't sleep. The Moore home, boarded up after the murders, stood empty for years. Eventually, it was restored as a historical site and opened for tours. What happened next only deepened its legend. Visitors, including skeptics, reported strange experiences. Asterisk footsteps echoing on stairs. Asterisk children's laughter in empty rooms. Asterisk shadows moving behind curtains. Asterisk doors slamming shut. Asterisk a heaviness in the air upstairs, where the family died. One paranormal investigator spent a night alone in the house and awoke with bloody scratch marks on his arm, though no one else was inside. The darkness remains. To this day, the Villisca axe murders remain unsolved. There was no justice for the Moore family. No final answers. Only questions. Only silence. Was it a madman? A jealous rival? A predator who killed for pleasure? Whoever it was, they left a stain on the soul of Villisca, a quiet little town that learned horror can grow in silence, and sometimes the scariest thing in the world is never knowing why. The unquiet house. If you visit Villisca today, you can still tour the house untouched, preserved as it was in 1912. You can sit in the parlor where the townspeople cried. Walk the stairs where Ross Moore found his brother's shattered body. Stand in the doorway of the guest room where Lena Stillinger met a brutal end. And if you're brave, you can stay overnight. Over time, Villisca became more than a mystery. It became a legend. The Moore home, still standing on a quiet corner of the town, passed through many hands before it was restored to its 1912 condition. Bloodstains scrubbed away, furniture replaced with period pieces, the axe placed back where it had been found. Not as a tribute. As a warning. Locals said the house was never empty. even when boarded up, even when still. The air inside was said to hum, vibrate, almost breathe. Pets refused to go near it. Lights would flicker in the upstairs windows, long after the house had no electricity. And then came the investigators. Into the house of death. Paranormal teams from across the country began flocking to Villisca. The owners allowed overnight stays, a rare opportunity to sleep inside one of America's most infamous murder scenes. Many didn't last the night. ##### Common reports included. * whispers from behind closed doors. * footsteps pacing the hallway at 3 a.m. * the sounds of children crying. * cold spots, not drafts, but dead, dense pockets of air that pressed down on the lungs. * bed sheets moving on their own. * a black figure seen watching from the upstairs window, always silent, always still. Perhaps most disturbing, voices on EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, recordings, often pleading. Don't go upstairs. He's still here. Get out, the knife in the wall. In 2014, a paranormal investigator staying the night suffered a near-fatal injury. Just after midnight, he was found crawling from the guest room, the very room where the Stillinger sisters were murdered, with a knife wound in his chest. There was no one else in the room. No weapon was found. He couldn't explain how it happened. He lived, but refused to ever speak about that night again. His final written note before leaving the hospital simply read, "Something is wrong in that house." The town's burden. For many in Villisca, the fame became a curse. They grew weary of ghost hunters, tourists, and conspiracy theorists descending on their town. Some say the crime should have been laid to rest. That digging into the past only reopens wounds. But others believe remembering keeps the truth alive. A few locals say they still see a man in a black coat walking the streets late at night, carrying something heavy, an axe, they claim. And sometimes, when it's quiet, you can hear a child's voice calling from the Morehouse porch. "Let me in. It's dark out here." A crime with no ending. The Villisca axe murders have inspired countless documentaries, podcasts, and books. Each one tries to do what the police could not. Solve it. Explain it. Close it. But each time, they return to the same, chilling facts. * no fingerprints. * no motive. * no confession. * no resolution. 8 people butchered in their sleep, and no one has ever answered for it. Perhaps the killer died long ago. Perhaps he was a stranger who vanished. Or perhaps the house took him too. The house remains. Over 100 years later, the Morehouse still stands, waiting. Not as a museum. As a grave. Inside, everything remains just as it was, the stairs that creak, the room that chills the bone, the axe resting in the corner. Not a single soul has ever spent a night in that house and left unchanged. Because someplace